Much like previous From Software titles, one of the most important NPCs you'll meet on your adventure is a blacksmith. Not only are they the most frequently visited characters, but they serve a crucial role in your ability to fell the greater foes on your journey. Today we'd like to discuss Elden Ring's blacksmith, Smithing Master Hewg. However, in order to create a better understanding of Hewg and his motivations, it's important that we first take a look at a sect of creatures within the Lands Between, called the Misbegotten. Before we go too far, spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't beaten the game yet. You will likely first encounter the Misbegotten in your journey through the Weeping Peninsula. The Misbegotten are winged creatures with long tails and humanoid faces. Though not all of them can take flight, they can use their wings to quickly close gaps while fighting our Tarnished, or propel themselves off the ground for a short while. Those that do not fly wield a long iron cleaver. The description of this weapon sheds light on their feelings towards those who have forced them into subjugation. Steeped in resentment, these weapons are swung wildly and relentlessly, often after rushing up to foes. Upon reaching Castle Morn, we are given our first indication as to why these creatures are so ruthless. A ghost found within the castle laments that he was eaten alive by filthy mixed-blood peasants, implying that his death mattered less to him than the way he died. A closer look into the Misbegotten reveals that they were treated as slaves or worse from the time they were born. These creatures can be found in multiple locations around the Lands Between, but most notably Castle Morn and Leyndell, the royal capital. Their presence in these areas tells a story of a race of creatures whose anger and resentment towards their masters has exploded into a righteous battle for their freedom. Why were the Misbegotten treated with such disdain and ultimately enslaved? We can glean quite a bit of information from the Beast Fang items dropped by Misbegotten. A rarely seen specimen of Beast Fang, these multiple, overlapping fangs grow from a single root. Perhaps they're a vestige of the primordial crucible. We touched on the primordial crucible a bit in the Crucible Knight lore video and found that this age before the Erdtree was where all life was once blended together. It stands to reason that the Misbegotten not only predate the Erdtree, but even possibly the Greater Will. Under the influence of the Greater Will, Queen Marika and her husband Godfrey had completely conquered all that came before them, almost resetting the world into an age of order. Crucible Knights, as discussed, were eventually seen as chaotic and deserving of scorn due to their power being derived from the ancient Crucible. With this knowledge, we can assume that all life prior to the Golden Order was considered too chaotic to live within Marika's world. This also adds some context as to why a Crucible Knight would fight side by side with a Misbegotten warrior inside Castle Redmane. They had suffered the same fate under the crushing laws of the Golden Order and likely see parallels within their struggles. The winged Misbegotten Ashes read, a spirit with the aspect of wings which takes flight to loose arrows from its bow. The Misbegotten are held to be a punishment for making contact with the Crucible, and from birth they are treated as slaves, or worse. Believing the Misbegotten, or perhaps their ancestors, were born from the primordial Crucible, we can only assume that their primal sin in the eyes of Marika was simply being born. It's important to note that the shattering of the Elden Ring was, in many ways, a shattering of Queen Marika's Golden Order as well, with the alignment of the world plunged into chaos as opposed to order. It's likely the Misbegotten saw this opportunity to permanently throw off their shackles and fight tooth and nail for their freedom. This brings us to Smithing Master Hewg. Upon our arrival at the Round Table Hold, we meet multiple Tarnished, all with their own journey and ambitions. There is, however, one outlier. A Misbegotten blacksmith chained to the ground, banging his anvil with purpose. Hewg explains that he is a prisoner, trapped by the hold, undying and smithing for us fools. Pressing him for more information reveals that he doesn't mind being held prisoner, strengthening our weapons, as it helps him forget the sheer terror of her. When Roderika the Spirit Tuner makes a new home at the Round Table Hold, Master Hewg immediately shows interest in her potential. It takes some convincing between the two of them, but eventually Hewg becomes something of a mentor to her. This kind of behavior is definitely out of the ordinary compared to the other Misbegotten we've encountered on our journey, but it stands to reason that Hewg is not an ordinary man. His compassion for Roderika, and later, his undying loyalty to our Tarnished, can perhaps be explained by his current position at the Hold and how he arrived there. Wandering around the hold, our Tarnished can stumble upon Hewg praying for forgiveness from Queen Marika. With the knowledge that Marika's Golden Order is responsible for the enslavement of the Misbegotten, it's clear that Marika herself personally enslaved Hewg in the hold. Later we can hear him mumbling to himself, scorning his own abilities for not being able to forge a weapon capable of killing a god. After burning the Erd tree, our Tarnished returns to the Round Table hold, a shadow of its former self and devoid of its denizens aside from Roderika and Hewg. Roderika explains that Hewg's shackles have been removed, yet he won't leave the crumbling hold. She begs us to convince him to leave with her, but unfortunately, Hewg has lost all memory of us, Roderika, and why he's even in the hold to begin with. He only knows that he is a blacksmith and refuses to leave. Roderika, devastated that he won't take advantage of his freedom, ultimately decides to stay by his side, but not before telling us Master Hewg was cursed by Marika to create a god-slaying weapon. She implores us to take that very weapon and slay Queen Marika. Master Hewg does succeed in this quest if we're able to fully upgrade our armament, and our Tarnished takes this god-slaying weapon inside the Erd tree to put an end to Marika and Radagon's rule. The Golden Order, which served to imprison and scorn creatures of the primordial crucible, is no more. Now, before we wrap this up, we'd like to indulge in a bit of speculation about how and why Hewg was imprisoned and cursed to forge a god-slaying weapon. Seeing as Hewg is a misbegotten, it's fair to say that he has been a slave since before the Shattering. With a talent as valuable as his, it's likely he was enlisted by the royal family themselves for his proficiency in his craft. As for why we find him chained to the ground in the Round Table hold, we have a theory. Snow Witch Rani, upon stealing the Rune of Death, needed a weapon forged that could slay Godwyn the Golden. Who better to enlist than the blacksmith of the royal family? Hewg, not in a position to decline an Empyrean, is likely responsible for the very weapon that slayed this god. Queen Marika would learn of his part in the Night of Black Knives and curse Hewg to forever forge in the Round Table hold as punishment. As we know, shortly after the death of her son, Marika shatters the Elden Ring in a violent display of resentment for the Greater Will. This act ultimately leads to her own imprisonment within the Erd tree. But why would Marika ask Hewg to create another god-slaying weapon, and how would she do so from within the Erd tree? This is obviously more theory crafting, but bear with us. With all the information given to us, it's clear that Melina must be a daughter of Queen Marika, as she states that she was given purpose at the foot of the Erd tree. Melina also says that she is able to communicate with her mother. Queen Marika, stuck within the Erd tree for eternity due to her resentment of the Greater Will, may have used Melina to deliver a message to Master Hewg. Craft another god-slaying weapon and free me from this eternal imprisonment. Even in her own death at the hands of a Tarnished, she would rebel against the outer god that allowed her son to die. A queen enlisting her own slave to free her. If nothing else, it has a nice ring to it, don't you think? It may be a stretch, but this was the one mystery we couldn't quite unravel and would love to discuss further. Speculation aside, Master Hewg is another character to suffer a tragic fate in our journey, and he is a true hero to the lands between. Another enslaved misbegotten, cursed by the rule of Queen Marika, destined to never break from his shackles, is ultimately a key player in the upending of her Golden Order. A hero to Roderika, ourselves, and all misbegotten. If you learned anything new about Hewg or the Misbegotten, or if you have anything to add to our findings, feel free to leave a comment. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you'd like to hear more Elden Ring lore from our channel. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden lore.